सूर्यो भाति न चन्द्रतारकं नेमा विद्युतो भान्ति कुतोऽयम् अग्निः त्वमेव भान्तम् अनुभाति सर्वं तस्य भासा सर्वमिदं विभाति Om. There the sun shines not, nor the moon, nor the stars, nor the lightning. Where is fire? Thou shining, every other object shines in this universe. It is thy light that illumines the hearts of the sages and devotees. Shine thou in our hearts, manifest therein all thy glory, and dispel our darkness and ignorance. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. The subject this morning is Hound of Heaven. The title of the subject suggests that there is no escape from heaven. A saint or a sinner makes no difference. Each one will find his abode in heaven sooner or later. Because the fundamental truth is that heaven is not way above, way out there, but heaven is within each one of us. Every moment of our life, we live, move, and have our being in God. There is this truth in the Upanishads we read. The self, the Atman, Brahman, is ear of the ear, mind of the mind, speech of the speech, is breath of the breath, and eye of the eye. There is a story in the Upanishads, a beautiful story, allegorical. One time, the Devas, or the gods, the angels, won a victory over the demons. And they became puffed up with pride and glory that it is our victory. In order to teach them a lesson, there appeared on the sky a spirit, a being. The gods gathered together, and they first said to the god of the wind, "Go and find out who this being is." He approached nearer, and then he was asked, "Who are you?" "Don't you know me? I am the god of the wind." "What can you do?" "I can blow everything of this universe." take this straw and blow it. The god of the wind fell with all his might to blow that little straw, but he failed. So he came back to the gods and said, I could not find out who this being is. Then the god of fire was sent. And as he approached, he was asked the same question. Who are you and what are you? I am the god of fire. What can you do? I can burn everything in this world. Burn this straw. And he fell upon it with all his might, but nothing could touch that straw. Then he came back and said, I failed to find out who this being is. Then all the gods as they gathered together, they told Indra, you better go and approach and find out. So he went, and as he approached nearer, this being disappeared. And there appeared before him the Divine Mother Uma, a most beautiful form, beautifully adorned. And this god, Indra, asked her, Mother, who was that being? And Mother Uma said, that was Brahman. Through him it was, not of yourselves, that you attained your victory and your glory. Thus it is said that these three gods, god of fire and god of wind and Indra, approached nearer to Brahman, so they are recognized as higher. And Indra was considered the highest because he had the vision of Mother, who is the one to open the door to the realization of Brahman. Then again, in the same Upanishad we read this. This is the truth of Brahman in relation to nature, whether in the flash of the lightning or in the wink of the eyes, the power that is shown is the power of Brahman. This is the truth of Brahman in relation to man, in the motions of the mind. The power that is shown is the power of Brahman. You cannot move a finger, you cannot think, you cannot breathe without that power, which is not outside of yourselves, but that power is within, and that is Brahman's power and Brahman within. For this reason should a man meditate upon Brahman by day and by night. Because it's a matter of experience. It's a matter of realization. You know, this reminds me of a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Prabhavananda, that one time told us that as I move my leg for walking, I feel that this motion is possible because of the power of Brahman. I feel it, I experience it. And another disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Shivananda, one day said to some of the disciples who approached him to study the Upanishads. He says, Upanishads, study our lives and you will understand the Upanishads. See, these are not mere theories. They are living truths. And as we read again in the Upanishads, he who realizes the existence of Brahman behind every activity of his being, whether sensation, perception, or thought, he alone gains immortality. And as I said, that I have seen the living examples of this truth in my life. Now, of course, again, as I said, that this truth of the Brahman or Atman dwells in every one of us, is equally present in his infinitude, in every one of us. Smaller than the smallest, greater than the greatest. He dwells forever within the heart of every being. Of course, it is very difficult for us, with our limited mind, to conceive of this truth, how that God, the absolute being, the infinite reality, could dwell within this heart, in each heart equally. It is difficult for us to conceive because of the fact that our mind cannot conceive anything without in terms of time, space, and relativity. We begin to think of anything as if existing in time, existing somewhere, and in relation to something else. But these, as one great German philosopher, Immanuel Kant, pointed out, that these are modes of the mind. These are not actual realities. And Professor Einstein scientifically proved that these have no absolute reality. And the Indian conception is they are Maya, within ignorance. So we have to transcend the limitations of time, space, and relativity. Then is it that this truth becomes unfolded, as it were. Truth is already within us. It becomes uncovered. And what is the one condition? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Each one of us, please remember this. This human birth, this human life has one purpose, one goal, and that is to attain God, to unfold that divinity which is in every one of us. And until we attain that, there is this hound of heaven, as it were, following us. We cannot escape. Now, what is the nature of this Brahman, of this self? They try to define God. The indefinable, the inexpressible. You see, when you experience, you've just become dumb, as I shall point out later. And Sri Ramakrishna used to say, never limit the limitless. Perhaps the best indication, not definition, best indication that is given in the Upanishads can be expressed as absolute existence or immortal life, pure consciousness, and abiding bliss and love. But it is very difficult to understand what these again mean. That also you have to experience. But the sinner or saint is trying to express this life, running after this life, running after joy and bliss, happiness, running after finding love. You see, they are trying to express that Brahman, God, who is within each one of us. Only saint is he who does it knowingly, consciously, and knows where to find that. And sinner is he who tries to unfold that unknowingly. You know, there is this example given of a musk deer. The deer gets the musk, you know, it grows in the Himalayas. This kind of deer only have in the Himalayas. But you girls know what musk is because most of you use that perfume. And this musk is grown in the navel of the deer. And the deer gets the fragrance of it. And he runs to catch hold of this. But it is inside himself, it is within him. But he thinks it is outside. And so he runs after everywhere to find that. And ultimately breaks his neck by dashing against a rock. Of course, for that gem that is within us, that Brahman that is within us, that may remain hidden in mud for centuries, for many lives, but it does not lose its luster. It will come out one day. So we hear that voice, as it were. And as Swami Prabhavananda one time said, you, the almighty cause of this universe, trying to reflect yourselves in little mud puddles. But after a time, you find that is not possible. So you turn inward, and that is the beginning of religion. Now in this connection, I'd like to read out to you this from the Psalms, some passages which are almost parallel to the Upanishads that I have just read to you. And also there is something more. O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my down-sitting and mine uprising. Thou understandest my thoughts afar off. Thou compassest my path and my lying down, and art acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Thou hast beset me behind and before, and laid thine hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain unto it. Whither shall I go from thy spirit, or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yet, yea, the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to thee. That's a beautiful truth here. The darkness and light are both alike to thee. You know, at one time, my master said to me, sin, is there any sin in God's eye? If his gracious glance falls, then heaps of sin can be burnt in a moment like heaps of cotton with a matchstick. Also, consider the experience of all the great seers and sages of the world. What do they see? As in the Gita it is said, Vasudeva Sarvamiti. The Lord is everywhere in every being. Sri Ramakrishna, seated with his disciples, and he said, do you know what I see before me? I see Rama in so many forms. Maharaj said, I see God playing in so many masks. And another disciple, Swami Shivananda, said, you'd bow down to even a cat. Because, he said, I can't help it. I see God first, and then I see the form. These are actual experiences. But of course, there is no denying the phenomenal experience of evil, ignorance, and suffering. The cause of suffering is nothing but ignorance. You see, this ignorance is something that is universal. The most intellectual man also has that ignorance and what you may call a dumbbell in slang. Also has that ignorance. But the first begotten son of ignorance is the sense of ego. You see, this ignorance has two aspects. One is it hides the reality and creates something new, which has no reality, which has no existence. So first it hides the ignorance, hides the reality, and then it creates that sense of ego. And as soon as that ego, I am a separate being, separate from others, separate from God. I feel a lack. And as such, I wish to fulfill that lack. And so, again, there comes attachment and aversion. Attachment to objects of the world and persons who give me pleasure, and there is aversion to such who give me suffering or pain. And I become bound by that law of karma. And then there is this clinging to this surface life. Now, of course, the real nature, as I said, in every one of us is that divine reality, divine being. But nature has two functions. One is to give us certain pleasures and enjoyments and sufferings along with that. Then we wake up and nature again leads us to freedom and happiness and joy and bliss. You know, in this connection, I may mention, strange as it may appear to you, Freud. You see, Freudian psychology points out that there are two wills in each one of us. He calls it the will to live or thirst and the will to die, and strangely enough, he calls that will to die as nirvana. And there's a conflict, as it were. Then he points out that ultimately each one of us can overcome this will to live, but none can overcome this will to die. The death of the ego. He doesn't know that, of course. You see, one great commentator, Vyasa, he says, it's a river with two opposite currents flowing, river of life. Surface current is towards enjoyment and pleasure. And along with that, of course, there is suffering. There is an undercurrent which moves towards the reality. And we have to strengthen this undercurrent. We have to dive deep, as it were, within ourselves. And that is the Hound of heaven. Nobody can overcome this will to Nibbana, will to freedom from all sufferings and bondages. Of course, there is this law of karma, as I said, and reincarnation, and this reincarnation means again, you are given so many chances to wake up. But I'd say that would be a lazy man's religion. Oh, if not in this life, some other life. Let me enjoy this life, make the most out of it. No. You can attain that in this very life, here and now. Of course, through the grace of Brahman again. You know, Sri Ramakrishna used to give the illustration. Mother gives dolls to children to play with. But she keeps watch over them, and also she loves equally all her children. And the children forget mother with the dolls, and mother keeps herself busy. But when any child weeps for mother, she immediately runs to him. Same way, God, who is within us, keeps watch over us. And He has that intense love, that abiding love for each one of us. How does he keep watch over us? As is the eye of the eye. He is the ear of the ear. He is the mind of the mind. As it is said, that divine universal spirit has thousands of hands, thousands of eyes, thousands of feet. He pervades and envelops all the universe. He resides within the small space of the heart and far transcends it. But as it is said in the Gita, that Kale Natmani Bindati only takes time. The time for each one of us has to come. But when does the time come? When you long for it. When you desire for it. That is all. Whenever anybody would ask Sri Ramakrishna how to find God, his one answer was, yearn for him with a longing heart. You know, my master once told me that, you see, unless one is thirsty, if I give him a drink of cool water, he doesn't like to drink that. But when one has the thirst, then you give the drink of water and he loves it. Similarly, you see, God loves us, but waits for us to give us that drink of nectar until we are thirsty. Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, though man be soiled with the sins of a lifetime, let him but love me. Rightly resolved, in utter devotion, I see no sinner. That man is holy. As I said, he loves us more than our mother and father, more than any human being can love. My master one time told me, our love is so deep that we do not let you know that we love you. And that is the love of God for all human beings. He doesn't let us know. And only we can feel that love when we have that longing for him, when we desire to know him. And in order to taste that love, his love, we need to practice certain disciplines in life. In order that longing can arise in our hearts, all these spiritual disciplines are to bring that yearning, that longing, that thirst. When you feel you can't live without God, that your moment, every moment is wasted in vain until he is revealed to you, then it is that the time has come. As we follow systematically the disciplines, what are those disciplines? Dispassion and love for God. And that love has to grow in us. And it grows in us only if we think and think and think and meditate and meditate. So, as I read from the Upanishads, read out to you, that meditate upon Brahman by day and by night. Then, what happens is, that his presence is felt. You have not yet seen him. You have not yet known him. But truly, he is existing truly within you. This conviction comes to you. And with that conviction there comes sweetness and joy and you struggle more. As in the Upanishads we read, to the man who has felt him as truly existing, reveals his innermost nature. Then he reveals his nature. And simultaneously, we feel that love, and we realize that he is exceedingly beloved Lord. Then it is said, that such a man becomes intoxicated, as it were. He becomes inert and silent, and his only delight is in God, in the Atman, in Brahman. You know, this intoxication comes Sri Ramakrishna, whenever he would go to the temple, somebody had to accompany him, because as he would come back, he would just walk like a drunkard, and he had to be helped. And one time I have read how someone saw him walking that way. He said, "That fellow is dead drunk." And how many times we have seen in our lives these disciples of Sri Ramakrishna would feel that drunkenness. So many times we have seen with our eyes. And Swami Shivananda at one time said, I go to meditate in the morning, and then I remain in that state of intoxication all day and night. Perhaps I may cite another example. A disciple of Maharaj, while he was visiting the temple of Jagannath at Puri with another brother disciple, he suddenly felt a sound of a thunder coming to strike him. He felt terror-stricken for the moment. Then when it did strike him, he lost all consciousness. Only he could remember his brother disciple holding one arm, and he saying to the priest, hold the other arm. Then he did not know. But he walked, he had some feeling, because he knew he was dragging like a drunkard, as if he had taken 4 or 5 bottles of wine. Then, as he approached the innermost sanctuary, there came to him this, from inside, God, God, God. And then, as he was in the innermost sanctuary, the walls disappeared, crowds of pilgrims disappeared, the deities in the temple disappeared. There was only light, ocean of light, and waves of bliss striking him. And they were becoming intenser and intenser. And then, as he was brought into the courtyard, suddenly he felt he was held by the arms, he stood up straight. These are living examples. And then they become also inert and silent. Sri Ramakrishna would go into that silence so many times. That is his highest samadhi, which is of course rare. And every day in his life he would go into that samadhi so many times. That's what I've heard from Maharaj, who lived with him 24 hours of day and night. And this state of silence is described by Shankara as a state of entire peace in which the intellect ceases to occupy itself with the normal. In this silence, the great soul who knows and is one with Brahman enjoys unmingled bliss forever. Then also, he becomes immersed in bliss. And we have seen in these disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, they would be living, acting, teaching, but they were immersed in bliss. In their presence, you could feel that peace, that bliss. And Shankara points out, no matter what he is doing, walking, standing, sitting or lying down, the illumined seer whose delight is the Atman lives in joy and freedom. In this connection, let me quote to you again this great seer philosopher Shankara, who having experienced himself that truth tries to describe that. The ego has disappeared. I have realized my identity with Brahman, and so all my desires have melted away. I have risen above my ignorance and my knowledge of this universe, of this seeming universe. What is this joy that I feel? Who shall measure it? I know nothing but joy, limitless and unbounded. The ocean of Brahman is full of nectar, the joy of Atman. The treasure I have found there cannot be described in words. The mind cannot conceive of it. My mind fell like a hailstone into this vast expanse of Brahman, of Brahman's ocean, touching one drop of it. I melted away and became one with Brahman. And now, though I return to human consciousness, I abide in the joy of the Atman. Om Hari Om. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrittor ma amritangamaya, abir maiti rudrajatte dakshinang mukhang, te namang pahi nityam. Om. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from death to immortality. Lead us from darkness to light. Light us through and through, and guide us evermore with thy loving presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace.